Some people makes us feel bad about ourselves. When we spend time with them, we might feel some kind of negative vibes. Or maybe certain people we hang out with just makes us do the things we are not supposed to do. These people are toxic influences. It's important to recognize these people or ourselves might be a toxic person. In this episode, we will share how to identify a toxic person or environment and how to handle these negative toxic influences in our lives. You are listening to the Barakah Effect Podcast, a weekly podcast where we dissect the Quran and the Sunnah and turn it into our unfair advantage to gain success in this world and the hereafter. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it. Barakallahu fikum.
ولو أن أهل القرى آمنوا واتقوا لفتحنا عليهم بركات من السماء والأرض.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yaumiddin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
How are you, brothers?
Good, alhamdulillah.
Khair.
We're good, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Experiencing a bit of a rain here in Damansara today. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
So
Alhamdulillah.
I had a nice 5-kilometer run in the heavy rain.
Oh,
Mashallah.
alhamdulillah. Refreshing.
It's not as fun as it sounds, but
Gives
But
you
to
that sense
complete
of
it-
grit, like driving.
yeah, exactly, right. But to complete it, that's awesome, right?
Inshallah.
Yeah.
While you're in it, so alhamdulillah, we need to feel awesome because especially when we're dealing with the topic that we chose for today's discussion, which is handling toxic influences, right? MashaAllah.
Inshallah.
So, inshallah, Brother Shahmi, you chose this topic, handling toxic influences. So, why don't you share with us personally why you chose this topic and perhaps why it's significant to you, inshallah?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Okay, first and foremost, I'll be completely honest. The main reason why I chose this experience is because of my own personal experiences. You know, and the personal experiences that I have experienced before, I could divide it into 3 parts. The experiences that I have, the things that I have experienced with family members and relatives.
I see.
Number 1, number 2, with friends and acquaintances, and number 3, that I myself felt like I was being toxic. Like,
oh, wow. Okay,
yeah.
inshallah.
Regardless whether that's just my own thinking or whether it's the truth, but regardless, I felt like I was toxic especially to my relatives and my family members. That's one point in my life that I felt that way.
Oh, mashallah.
So looking back, I felt like this could not be the way to live life, because how can you live with someone that's toxic and influence others to feel down, or you in extreme cases you might put one into despair, and he or she might go spiraling down into the depth of depression and whatnot. So I've seen this with my own eyes.
Wow. Because
And these
toxic
people,
influences?
this type of relationships,
Oh,
and subhanallah, it's I think it's prevalent in the ummah today, especially more so than those in the previous than those in our within the predecessors. So I am curious to understand this topic, especially the hows and the whys and the solutions, especially
Right.
that is derived from the Quran and the Sunnah, and as well as from scientific studies from experts. Because although there are solutions that I've tried and tested, some of them work and some of them don't. But so I'm now curious to see what do Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about this. And of course, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best of examples. So that is it is better for us to take examples from the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the sahabah, the companions radiallahu anhum. So just to highlight some of the things that I've experienced. For instance, I have encountered relatives who actually, the way that he or she is being toxic is really subtle. The way they talk, the way they talk, the gestures that they use, is very subtle. But that this guy is exuding toxicity. So and then when you are around him or her, you feel like your energy, you feel like your overall spirit, your semangat goes down.
Okay.
So you feel, and then probably to the point that you wouldn't want to talk to anyone after that because of you being in the presence of this person. So it's really it's something really worrying. So that is why more than the other topics, I would like to discuss, and I would like to know the solutions, what we can come up with to actually face these things, or to eradicate this toxic characteristics that are present in ourselves.
Right, sure. This is very good actually, because the thing is, whenever I think about experiences at the workplace as well, people always say that the technical job itself, that's never really the challenge. Okay, you have some challenges, but the real difficulty is in managing people.
Yeah.
So when it comes to managing people, there's no running away from this topic of toxic influences. So I think it's very good for us to address this topic. Number one, in dealing and handling these people as peers, as colleagues, within people around us. But secondly as well, just as Brother Shahmi highlighted, as the Prophet ﷺ, he was also the leader of his people. How do you handle if your subordinates or people who are under your control are being toxic influences to others? Right. So I think that's we look at both angles, inshallah. So let's get into the definitions now. So what do we mean by toxic influences? This is one of the things where people, I believe these days, people are throwing these terms just left, right, and center. Every time you do something that doesn't agree with them, you're toxic. Let's get rid of this guy. So let's put up some boundaries to what do we mean by what we say toxic influences. So brothers, you want to share? What do you mean by toxic influences?
There's a quote by someone. He said, this is more like it's not a comprehensive definition, but it's interesting that he said this. Toxic people defy logic, he said. Some are blissfully unaware of the negative impact that they have on those around them. Right. And others seem to derive satisfaction from creating chaos and pushing other people's buttons. Either way, they create unnecessary complexity, strife, and worst of all, stress. So it's this is I guess his take on the definition. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess in terms of looking at it from your own perspective, toxic people, in the sense, leave you with a, let's say, bad or negative impression. For example, they would affect your mood, or they would affect how you behave, how your outlook will be towards the things around you, towards the world. So in that sense, the key word here is influence. I would say it is how that person affects you in a negative way, to put it simply.
Yeah.
So it might be
very good.
By guilt tripping, manipulative, or like just influencing you towards bad ideas and things like this.
Yeah, it's very good. So actually, I'm trying to ground this to a baseline hadith, just to make things into a simple perspective that we can understand. So the hadith that I always come back to when it comes to influencers is the hadith about the companion, between a good companion and a bad companion. So the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari, he says that the example of a good companion is like the person who sells perfume, sells musk. So at best, you'll get the perfume from him, or at the very least, you'll smell nice just by being in his presence. And the example of a bad friend, a bad companion, is like a one who blows the bellows like a blacksmith. So the worst case is you burn your clothes while hanging out with the guy. But the least impact that you'll have is when you come back, you'll have a smell of smoke. So when you talk about toxic influences, I always come back to this example. So even if you want to relate it to something that we can relatable today, it's like hanging out with a smoker, right? The worst case, if you hang out with a smoker, the worst case is you'll try one, you get one from him, right? You get influenced by his smoking attitude. The least is you'll come back with your hair smelling of smoke, cigarettes.
Yeah, being a second smoker.
Yeah, secondhand smoker.
Secondhand smoker, yeah.
So with respect to this, I always try to remind myself, it's whenever you have that kind of negative impact, whether it's small or big, that's a degree of toxicity, of toxic influence. And also, I think we need to realize from this hadith that every single one of us is part of our environment. So we say that, people are affecting us, bad environment, negative, positive influence, all these things. But we are also part of the environment. We are also giving off a smell. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we giving the smell like a perfume seller? Are people being positively impacted by our presence? Or are we actually, like Shahmi said, are we self-aware of ourselves to admit that we're actually having a negative smell towards other people? Subhanallah. And I think with this in mind as well, I think it's important for us to remember that when we say something, when we're referring to toxic influences, it's important not for us not to label people. So say, oh, this guy is a toxic guy, or this guy is a negative guy. And even when it comes to religion, when you throw away terms like, oh, this guy is a deviant or a ahlul bid'ah, I mean, these terms, ahlul bid'ah meaning people of innovation. Now, these terms are in the books, but it's not for us to go simply around shooting from the hip, say, oh, you are a deviant, you are a deviant, you are a deviant. You know, this cancel culture kind of attitude.
Oh,
So
it's prevalent today, man.
Yeah, it's very prevalent today, right? Subhanallah. So I think in reality, we have to come back to the grounds that there's no such thing as an absolute negative or absolute positive. We're all lying on the spectrum. But what we want to be is as much as possible to be predominantly as positive as possible, and to minimize the negative and toxic influences from ourselves. What we want to be is something like what Prophet Isa alayhi salam said in Surah Al-Maryam, which is وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُ, that Allah made me Mubarak, blessed wherever I may be. And when you look at the books of tafsir, what it means by Mubarak, what it means by blessed in this case is a presence that's always calling people to good and forbidding the evil. He's always adding value to the people around him. That is the example of a good companion. That's what we want to be. So what we don't want to be is the negative side, which is the topic that we are speaking about today, inshallah.
Do you guys ever heard the saying of show me your friends and I'll show you your future? You ever heard that?
Yeah, I've heard.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, mashallah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I heard a similar quote. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with, something like that.
Mashallah.
I ever heard that.
Yes.
But somehow I agree with that because influence. Yeah, that is the influence that we want, because the influence we always get is from our friends or our family, but mostly from our friends, I think.
Yeah, and interesting that in relations to what Brother Faisal said, there's a psychologist by the name of Judy Gale, and she said it is not that the person is toxic, rather their behavior or your relationship with that person is. So it's important to make this distinction, right?
That's a very good one, yeah.
The distinction between the person versus behavior. So she adds that this distinction can help us understand 3 fundamental things. First, she said, such toxic behavior is not essential to who the person is, and therefore it can be changed. A toxic person is still first and foremost a person deserving respect. Most of the time, toxic persons are deeply wounded and cannot take responsibility for their own feelings and needs.
Wow,
so
that's a good point. Yeah.
We need to empathize, you know. And secondly, she said, the unnecessary complexity and stress that follows from this interaction is also poisoning the toxic person. Don't simply think that this toxicity that is exuding from this person is only harming you, but it's actually harming themselves too.
Wow. So you come from a place of empathy, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Mashallah,
and she said, who might not know how to act differently. The way they act is because he or she does not know how to act accordingly, properly. And the third one, she said, there are some other parts of the person you might appeal to when you're in a toxic relationship or conversation. And this is, not everything from him or her is toxic. You know, in the verses in the Quran, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He said in many places, right? Probably something that you might hate. It might be good for you, and vice versa is
Right.
true as well.
Yeah.
So we need to recognize, the good things as well, not only to focus on the bad things from this person.
Can-
This is how.
Yeah, can I
Yeah.
use this
Yeah.
example for the last point?
Yeah.
We have someone that who is positive. He can speak about motivation, but when he speaks about politics, he will be a bad influence.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, there are always multifacets to everyone, isn't it? So you
Mhm.
may be a positive influence when it comes to the workplace, but when it comes to
Mm.
certain things, you're like, this guy. switches,
Subhanallah.
Sahih.
Just some triggers, huh?
yeah, triggers something else.
Triggers.
And I really love what
There's a-
Shami mentioned. Sorry, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
So there's a HR guide I used to read. So he said that sometimes toxic environment is actually it's actually a byproduct. It's an outcome, of
Yeah.
of you failing to manage smaller conflicts at the workplace. So if the conflicts
Smaller conflicts,
left,
okay.
so if that small conflicts is left untended and
Unresolved.
left to grow unresolved, so that may lead to toxic environment, So
Oh,
Yeah, actually, I really like the point that Shami mentioned, because it's important for us to, you need to humanize these people, even though they're toxic influences. They are human beings,
Mhm.
and there's a good side to it as well. And even if you look at today, how people write stories, even science fiction, even things which are fantasy, the best villains are always those who are relatable. Those
Of
who
course.
are, there's always a side to them. Say, oh, I get it. I don't agree with him, but I
Yeah.
get it.
I get where
empathize.
he's coming from.
I
I
get
know
where
why.
he's coming from.
Yeah.
It's bad, but all right, I get
Poor
it.
guy.
Poor guy.
Poor guy.
And actually, that's a very good point, especially coming from the perspective of a Muslim, because when it comes to da'wah, when you come from a side of compassion, when you want to help them, and you recognize that they are facing through problems and their toxicity is an expression of their problems, it kind of channels the way that you think that, oh, I'm in a situation where I'm not a victim. I'm in a situation where I actually kind of want to help. So that's a good mindset to start off with, inshallah. So I just want to get into what are some examples of these toxic influences. So in practice, what is how do these toxic influences look like? What are the categories we can say of these toxic influences that you're aware of?
Yeah, I think that there's no one person that embodies toxicity, right? The toxicity in and of itself is something vague, is quite vague, and is quite general. Many
Sure.
things can fit under the umbrella of being toxic. So so there are a few there are several types of if you can say toxic people, and they come in more categories than we care to count, actually.
Okay. Let's see some of
So,
them, like
yeah.
just to understand. Yeah.
Okay, from I'd say, like, from emotional vampires to drama magnets,
Ooh, how does that look like?
Yeah,
These are
drama.
people who
Drama
exhibit
queen.
toxic personalities, that can affect your emotional well-being, whether they know it or not. So the only way, one of the ways you can avoid these people is to identify who they are, based on how they act, what words they say, and how they make you feel, right?
Right.
Because ultimately we need to stay away. If it cannot be avoided, we need to stay away from these people. As the hadith say, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the mu'min, the believer, la yaldihul mu'minu min haji wahid marratain. The believer uses his akal, uses his thinking, to not let themselves be bitten or stung in the same hole twice.
Right.
So we need to know these things. Yeah. So
what are the key signs?
one of the types of people that can be categorized as toxic are critics. Number one are critics. Critics are not necessarily bad. critics, they give, some of them give positive criticism, but the critics here is not
Just for the sake
positive
of
critics.
critic.
Yeah, as the name
Yeah,
suggests, this
okay.
type of toxic person undermines your sense of self-esteem. This is main because they have low self-esteem as well. They have low
Right.
self-esteem as well,
Mm.
right? And then we have passive aggressors. So passive aggressors exhibit a behavior that can be categorized as an expression of rage in a passive manner. So this is one of the things that I have encountered a lot.
Oh yeah.
They-
Aggressive, is it?
Yeah, passive aggressive.
How does it look like in practice? Give me an example if you want to play it out.
Okay. They don't get directly to the point, They beat around the bush, and often find ways
okay.
to make you feel their anger without explicitly telling you.
Oh.
Right,
Is it
right.
manipulating? No.
Yeah. For instance, I don't think it's you be the judge, but I'm going to give you an example. For example, okay, let's have the example of okay lah, borrowing a car from someone, right? So he's angry that you want to borrow his car, but at the same time he doesn't want to show
Express
that
his
he's
anger.
angry. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, I don't care, whatever. So you took his keys, and then you drove and then you said, I promise I'll be back in an hour, but you came back like an hour and a half, for example, right? So and then when you get, oh, sorry, I'm late. Here are the keys. It's like, and he might say something that might hurt you, or just make you feel like
Some condescending remarks.
some condescending remark or sarcasm. This is one of the key points.
Sarcasm. Right.
Sarcasm.
Right. Very good.
Yeah. And the third, we have narcissists. Narcissists.
Right.
Yeah, toxic people that fall under this category often choose a single way to undermine your happiness, one-way communication. So when speaking to narcissists, you will find yourself losing any chance of getting a word in during conversations. The worst part
Okay.
is that they only talk about themselves. This is the worst
Only
part.
themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't want any don't wait for any response from the other person they're talking to, and
Right.
just adore hearing their own voice. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, we're not these people.
I hope so.
Inshallah.
Yeah, I meet these people. So sometimes when you speak about things, they like to interrupt you and says, "Oh, that's still okay." You know about me? Like they like
Oh
to
my God.
one up you further, right? So when you
I
say
can
something,
relate to that.
Why is it a competition though? Why is it a competition?
yeah, so you say something positive, like, "Oh, I did like 5,000 steps today." I did 8,000. So what?
It's like
Is that like-
downplaying your whatever you are saying.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So is that an example of a
The
narcissist?
funny part of that, they
Yeah.
always one up you even in bad things. Like say, oh, I have a bad day. I have a worse day. Nah, my day is worse than you.
If it's good, I have
Brother
the
Amir, I
best
think this is
day.
more common.
This
Right.
is like
They
so
one
the
up you
narcissistic, right?
in the negative
behavior?
things. Yeah, pardon?
This is more
So-
like the narcissistic behavior. Like I am
Yeah, one of the
like
red flags, I guess, of a
Okay.
narcissist.
So this comes under that category, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Mm.
And the last one, inshallah, is something called a group of people called the Stonewallers. The Stonewallers.
Stonewallers.
Stonewallers sounds like a rock band name. Okay.
It does.
So the act of stonewalling refers to the refusal to maintain open communication when discussing an important matter about the relationship. So stonewallers are one of the worst people to get into a relationship with. Okay. Yeah, because of obvious reasons, they will leave you hanging and never try to resolve whatever issue you might have. Generally, these people have in their hearts, something called al-hiqd in Arabic, al-hiqd, or malice, hatred, bitterness, spiteful,
Right.
Yeah. These people, I mean, in general, not only the stonewallers, like all these people in general,
Right.
they have this rage, bitterness.
Does that also come under the banner of passive aggressive, like not being upfront?
It could be. It could be.
Doing something else to hurt you in different ways, for example.
Yeah, it could be.
Maybe it is revolving around these concepts.
Can I say when in workplace, we have a kind of boss that when in meeting, he's the only one who's talking.
Yeah, of
Is
course,
it?
of course.
Yeah.
But
That's more on the dominant type, isn't it? That's more
yeah,
on like a
that's dominant type.
Oh,
narcissism.
okay.
Yeah.
I think the stonewalling here is more like you don't want to confront, so you just give them the cold shoulder. Is
Yeah.
that the context?
Yes.
Right. I think this is very common amongst Malaysians, and I say that I'm being Malaysian myself.
Mm.
So we have this thing called terasa. Like when you get offended by
Terasa.
people,
Mhm.
you just completely avoid all conversation, all contact, and then
Cancel.
yeah, and then you have this cancel culture behind the scenes, but you don't want to confront them. You don't want to have these difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So I think that's the issue, isn't it? About the toxic culture category here, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
When it comes to stonewallers. All right, very good.
So,
So yeah, I think
you might find these people you are trying to confront him, or maybe you're trying to give advice to him or her. They just said, oh, I don't have time, I have a headache or something,
right.
just go away and you brush it off, like
Yeah.
he or she knows that this is something that needs to be addressed, but she could not take the criticism, or at least what she or he thinks that she will be receiving lah from this conversation that they are about to have. So instead of having an open mind, they already have a negative perception of how the outcome is going to be. Like I will get hurt, and this person will get a good laugh or something. This is
right.
the thing.
Oh, they feel like joy in your
Yeah.
pain.
Yes, and
Okay.
in fundamentally this is su'udhan. Having
What is
bad,
Su'uzan? Aki Fahmi?
it's like to have a bad, how do you say this in English?
Thoughts, negative.
Bad thought.
Thoughts.
of
Yeah,
people.
negative thoughts about people. You assume something, bad assumption,
Bad
assumptions,
assumptions.
bad assumptions about someone. Yeah. And I like what
Perception.
pardon.
Perception.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I used to. Sorry. Yeah, I had a bad connection there. So I used to face a lot of these people all the time. I just want to make sure are we in the same category? So people who get offended, who are unhappy with me, I meet them in person. I ask them, is everything okay? Say, yeah, everything's fine. But behind the scenes, they are like, oh, this is shooting this guy. This guy is a useless bad guy. Is that like an example of a stonewaller?
Yeah, it might be. That might be a more detailed version of the stonewallers, but because stonewallers, I think here it generally means you avoid any sort of conflict lah.
Right. Okay, very good. Right.
Yeah.
Emotional vampires, just to get on that point. So example are people who always play victim. So they say that, when you try to help them, they're always highlighting another problem, then going to another problem. So you feel drained just by being in their presence.
Exactly.
That's an example of emotional vampire, right?
Yes, I think so.
There's another one you said that's always likes to, was it rebelling, questioning authority? What's that?
Yeah, that can also be one of the red flags of being a toxic. But I said drama magnets. Drama magnet,
right, yeah.
They just want to, maybe they seek attention from people around him or her.
Right. Yeah, this is the most common one I see as well at workplace. So people are always complaining about situations, and what it does is it drags the morale down, and it creates a sense of people are fine with where they are, but because they keep hearing all these negative things, they realize that, my job does suck actually. So it feeds them a lot of this negativity. And when people I hear this a lot when people talk about politics, when people are always questioning authority, it paints the picture that our leaders are not competent. And what this does on the back end is it makes people comply less with the laws. It makes people more ungrateful. That's another form of toxicity that I've witnessed.
So what we can observe here is that toxicity does not have one fundamental
specific
category.
Many angles to it.
There are many angles to it.
Do you cover bully as well?
Yeah, of course, bully, right?
Bullying, yeah.
Bullying is
very good.
It's a very toxic environment if you live in that kind of household, or with schoolmates that bully you all the time, or even in workplaces.
Because
One.
bully sometimes is not just the physical bullying, but it's also the
Yeah.
emotional bullying is also
Emotional bullying.
is also important to know. Yeah, it gives a lot of it develops into stress, into depression. Yeah, if it's untreated.
Yeah.
It
Very
can
good.
preserve, let's say, present itself in the workplace as well. I guess this emotional bullying, in the sense that you don't want to look like you're outright being unjust to another person. One person might be, and they might just emotional bully you, for example.
Yeah. You might feel incompetent because they are excluding you from decision. Yeah. They can micromanage you, and then you feel very tight, and you can't really express your creativity at work at all. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think in this day and age, it's like hyper intensified because everything is online. The platforms are online, and everyone has a presence online. Let's say, for example, in the media or in the social media platforms, you see a lot of people. Sometimes they're very opinionated, very loud, and they influence people towards negative things which are not good. And subhanallah, something that really has something to do with it, which is from the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 11, in regards to the hypocrites, when it said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. So when it said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they just say we are reformers, so they don't really
we're trying to do
Really
good.
good.
we're trying to do good, you know. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Subhanallah. So it's quite important that we know the science and we are aware of toxic influences in our life, because nowadays sometimes it's difficult to say which one is correct and which one is not, you know. So it's not easy, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, and
Sorry, go ahead, Aziz. I was just thinking
go ahead, brother.
So I was just thinking take a step back in terms of toxic, because a lot of toxic in psychology, in motivational topics, they try to address toxic that result in poor performance. But toxic can mean more than that. Yeah, toxic can also mean, like, for instance, you being involved in haram things. So that's a toxic to your religion, or you being unable to fulfill certain obligations like prayer. That also can be toxic to you and your religion, and also can be toxic in terms of, like, when they plant doubts in your religion as well from at your workplace. So the way I see toxic is something that relates to your work performance, and another part of toxic that relates directly to your obligation as a Muslim. So those are the two toxic.
That's very good.
Portion.
And
that's
the worst
very
type,
good. Yeah, so
and sorry. And just to add to Brother Amir, and I think the worst type of toxic people that in terms of religion are those who do bad things, who do ma'asi, sins, and also calling people towards doing ma'asi.
Right,
sins,
yeah.
So,
I call that category the cultists.
the cultists.
So they present themselves.
Should add that in there.
Yeah, that's another category. So these are people who are very charismatic, like what Brother Reza said. Oh no, we intend good for you. And by the way, this is the same marketing slogan used by Shaitan, Iblis himself. So in Surah Al-A'raf, he says, Inni lakuma laminan nasihin. Oh, I'm a good, well-wishing. I just want good for you. This is how he deceived Adam and Hawa in paradise. He said, oh, you cannot eat from the tree. You know why? Because this tree will grant you everlasting life. But I'm just trying to give good advice for you. Same like marketing strategy. So this is what these cultists do. And what Amir said is very, very important. So when we try to judge what is toxic and not, we need to come with a very clear criterion between right and wrong. And so as a Muslim, that furqan, that criteria that differentiates between what is right and what is wrong, comes from what Allah has defined as what is good, as what is wrong. And that's very, very important, because in today's time, there are a lot of people who come across as trying to promote a value, but promoting that value means you have to compromise an Islamic principle. Now they will look like a positive influence. You look at it from the perspective of Islam, they are denying or they're being toxic against Islamic principles or Islamic teachings. So that's something we have to be very, very sharp as Muslims. We have to be like, we don't just follow the crowd and say, oh, just because it's human rights, everything is good under that human rights. Of course, human rights is definitely something we should aspire to have, but the elements within that sometimes it's just a marketing strategy packaged under something else.
Yeah, subhanallah.
And this, I guess, is not known except for if you seek knowledge and know what
Definitely.
is mentioned in Islam, what is right and what is wrong. Then you will have the let's say, to discern the right and the wrong becomes much clearer for you. And of course, it's also the guidance from Allah, the tawfiq from Allah.
Yeah, mashallah, very brilliant. So that's
So
a very
and
good point. So that segues into the next part of the discussion now.
So
Let's
can
discuss.
I just have on something on that. Just want to relate what Sheikh Salih Fawzan talked about that. Yeah. So when he
Yeah.
talks about like the fitnah of the ummah, which is of Ummah Muhammad, the fitnah is in wealth. Yeah, and part of that
Yeah.
wealth is part of this fitnah is about how you acquire that wealth. Yeah, which is a toxic workplace. Toxic workplace. That's one fitnah. They say that
Right.
the first step for you to know a fitnah, for you to handle fitnah, is for you to know that fitnah itself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the
Right.
fitnah,
Sahih.
then it's
Yeah.
not a fitnah for you, and you will submerge in it. Yeah, you will just fall into it.
Just like half of the
True.
solution is to identify the problem. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
And that's a very important point. You have to be proactive about seeking knowledge. See, what tends to happen is when you're already stuck in the predicament, and then when you learn about something, you find out that something is haram, it's difficult for you to turn back. If you, in day one, you already decide, oh, this is not for me, and you just put your foot down, just say, I respect you as my colleague, but this is something that I cannot do, or this is a group that I don't want to get involved in. And so you save yourself from that. But if you're already in the thick and thin of things, and you find out it's, oh man, my friend is, it's very difficult, man. So yeah, it's a good reminder for us to be proactive before we get into the problems itself.
Subhanallah. Sahih.
Right. So speaking about religious knowledge, so let's get grounded now. What are some examples from the Quran and Sunnah that we can find that illustrate the impact and basically the concept of these toxic influences in communities and societies? Can anyone share?
I have an example from the time of the Tabi'in.
Students of the companion, you mean?
Yeah, the students of the
Tabi'in.
companion.
Right, Tabi'in, yeah, followers, yeah, literally
Followers.
students of the
Companions.
of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, very good.
Wasallam. So basically, this is the story of Imran ibn Hittan. And it is mentioned by Ibn Kathir in his book Al-Bidayah wa Nihayah, and also Imam al-Dhahabi in his Siyar A'lam al-Nubala. Basically, Imran ibn Hittan, in the end, he's known as Imran ibn Hittan al-Khariji. Initially, he was originally known from among those from the scholars of Ahlus Sunnah. So he's a very pious person, and he knows what is right and what is wrong, and he's one of the people of Ahlus Sunnah. But somewhere along the way, it was narrated that there was this woman who was from among his close relatives who was extremely beautiful, and he basically fell in love with her. But the problem is that she is known to be from the Khawarij. So the Khawarij is basically one of the sects in Islam where they are basically extremists. They rebel against the ruler. They do all sorts of fasad and basically have the incorrect akidah according to Islam. So basically the rebels, basically, and you see a lot of them now as well present. Like for example, people like ISIS, these people. So when he fell in love with his family, Khawarij woman, he thought to himself that he wants to reform her. So he came with the idea that he wants to turn her
so
back.
So he recognized that what she was on was not correct. So he felt like I have a chance to change this woman.
Exactly. Subhanallah. So he knows that this woman was involved in a toxic environment, and he wanted to do good and had the good intention to guide her back to the right path. So he married her. But in the end, somehow toxic influences, and this is the thing about toxic influences, sometimes you think you are able to go over it or rise above it, but sometimes it's not within your capacity, basically. So
Yeah, and then you get dragged down by that.
You get dragged down by that. So you come
subhanallah.
into the fitnah as well, subhanallah. So this is something that we need to really internalize and be careful. So he was, in the end, he was known as Imran ibn
Khariji.
Hittan Khariji. So he became one of the Khawarij himself. So subhanallah. This is a very important, this is a very important lesson that you might think you can handle toxic influences, but actually, if you are not aware of it, and if you think you are overconfident, you might be influenced by it as well. So, subhanallah. This is
This is
one
a very
story
deep lesson.
from the Tabi'in, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's why if you look at Surah Nisa, Allah says, when you hear about the people who mock the Quran, don't sit with them.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you do, innakum idhan mithlahum. If you sit with them, you will eventually be like them. So you might think that, these are people who mock the Quran, I'm going to sit with them so that maybe the intention is good, but eventually you get swept away. And honestly, this is how a lot of people get into smoking.
Yes.
You hang out with smokers long enough, you might initially dislike it. You might think that, it's okay, I'm not affected by that. And by the way, honestly, this is how I fell into that fitna myself. So back in my early days of youth, I used to hang out with smokers all the time. And I used to tell myself that, it's okay, I'm not going to get involved in this. I know this is wrong. But I used to hang out with them so much. They used to talk about it all the time. They used to do it every day. And then eventually I was like, curious lah. Give me a shot. Can I try? And then eventually I joined them. And then I became somebody who invited people who to start. Allah Musta'an. So that's really, really bad.
If you can't beat them, join them. Yeah.
I think that's also an example how
That's a very, very good point. You might think that you are above it, but do you purposely disassociate yourself? Yeah, sorry about that. It's bad connection. Yeah, go on, Amin.
Sorry, that's an example. Sometimes your desires, your shahwat, influence your akidah, your belief, your faith.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, like what Reza mentioned, so he's the reason why he fall into that belief, is because of his desire for that woman, So that's one example. Let's say the one that desire is about relationship, But sometimes if you are surrounded by so many negative attributes or actions in your workplace, and eventually you do it, and then one way, because you're indulged in it in that bad traits, then you start to say, okay, it's okay, man. This couldn't be that bad, Like what I'm doing, it shouldn't be that bad. So you start to water down the prohibition of such action. So that then later then eventually it comes to, it's okay. At least I pray, At least I might do that, but at least I do this. So bit by bit, it influence your belief, it deteriorates your faith.
Yeah, desensitize our faith, right?
Desensitize, that's the word.
Desire.
Yeah, very good. There's a phrase in Malay, I don't know if you heard this. It's very famous among political circles. They say, ramai orang masuk politik, nak ubah politik. Akhirnya politik mengubah mereka. People go into politics thinking they want to change politics. But in the end, politics changes them. Subhanallah.
Look at how toxic the environment is within
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the implication.
Better stay away from that.
Yeah, that's right.
That highlights the importance to be authentic. Like if to me, like if I want to talk about authentic, as a one solution for as a shield against a toxic influence, the best example I can think of is when Ja'far bin Abi Talib, when he was seeking a refuge in Habasha, and then in
Ethiopia, right?
Ethiopia,
and then migration before Medina.
First migration,
so they migrated to
exactly, and then the king Najashi, the king of Ethiopia, who is a Nasrani, who a Christian, wanted the Muslim to tell him about what Christianity is all about from the lens for Muslim. So Ja'far, just be authentic.
What Jesus,
He he just be authentic of what the religion says about Christianity. So he didn't try to balance out the by telling something favorable to King Najashi, but he just said it out. He just be authentic. He just be firm. He just be honest and say the others. He just depend on Allah. If Allah wills, but Allah has better plans. King Najashi liked Ja'far bin Abu Talib's explanation, and that's it. So he, by being authentic, he didn't have to but to save himself. Yeah, imagine that time if he had said something that might hurt the king. Yeah, the whole Muslim contingent might be shipped out, might be forced to go back to Mecca at the time. Yeah,
Right.
chose to just be authentic, just to be honest. Yeah.
Right. So just to put some context into that. So basically the contradiction of the Aqidah back then was that they used to believe that Jesus was the son of God. And so the Quraysh thought that, oh, these guys say that Isa, Jesus, is a slave. So they wanted to use it as a point to make the king dislike the Muslims and say, oh, you know what they say about Isa? Go and ask them. So that's when they clarified, oh, Isa is a slave of Allah and his messenger. So that's what Amir said. Just put your foot down, just be authentic. You don't have to cover up or be wishy-washy about the message.
Yes.
Very good, mashallah. Right, so for me, when I look at the Quran and Sunnah, what I found was the most prominent examples of toxic influences. Number one are the Bani Israil of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Oh man, these guys, so toxic, man. Always questioning Prophet Musa, always finding ways, loopholes around the Sharia, always confronting Musa. For example, like when Musa alayhi salam told them to sacrifice the cow, look at the words. Ask your Lord. By the way, it's our Lord too. You know, it's like it's like your brother, your sibling is saying that, oh, go talk to your mom. Oh, that's super rude, man.
Condescending, yeah.
Yeah, very condescending. So he said, yeah, go ask your Lord. What kind of cow does he mean? They kept coming out with excuses. And even in one ayah in Surah Baqarah, it says, oh, we're not going to worship Allah until we see him with our own eyes. What is this? No messenger, no prophet has seen Allah with his eyes in his life. No way. So they're asking things, demanding things. And you see, the thing is, I always put myself, now there's something very important to note as Muslims. I need to remind us that when we talk about Bani Israil from the Quran, it's important to note that when Musa alayhi salam was sent to these people, they were the Muslims at the time. Does that make sense? So now we like to talk about, Bani Israil, they were Jews, they were stubborn people. Oh, by the way, no, these are the people who the prophets were sent the nation to. And the Prophet ﷺ said that you will follow in their footsteps, step by step, to the point where even if they were to go into a lizard's hole, you would follow them. So these examples of the Quran, of them being contentious, always questioning, these are not for us to look down and say, these are the Jews. That's not the point. The point is you need to learn from it so you don't be like that.
Put yourself in that situation, right?
Right, don't put yourself in that situation. So I put myself in, like when I read these ayat in the Quran, I imagine, what if I was amongst the Bani Israil back then? And if I hear these very loud people who are always questioning our prophet, our messenger, that will bring down your morale. Because people are questioning your leader, questioning your authority now. People realize that, this guy, he probably can't set out his lieutenant straight. So that drags down the whole morale. And that's the problem about toxic influences in our workplace, in our families. Imagine if people are always questioning your father, undermining your father. Eventually people realize that, this guy is weak. He can't even control his son. He can't even control his daughter. So this is another side effect of perception. It's not the truth, but to do perception, that's how people behave. Another example that a very prominent, sorry, you want to say something, Ashami?
No problem. Go ahead, brother. I'll go after you, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. So another example for me, very prominent in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ when it comes to toxic influences, are the hypocrites, the munafiqun. Oh man, these guys, like epitome of toxic influences.
Toxic influence.
So what are the hypocrites? So the hypocrites are people who pretended to be Muslims, but they were in fact disbelievers. So they were living amongst the Muslim communities with the companions radiallahu anhum. They were praying at the masjid, but deep down inside, they didn't have any faith in Islam whatsoever. Now, the chief of this is known as Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul. Now, there's some backstory to this. Abdullah bin Ubay, before the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, they wanted to crown him to be the king of Medina.
Or
But
Yathrib back then.
That's right, that's right. Back then it was called Yathrib, right? Before
Yeah.
it was, very good point. Yeah. So he was supposed to be the leader of Yathrib. But when Muhammad ﷺ came to Medina, he basically assumed position of leadership. So this guy always had a resentment against the Prophet ﷺ. This guy stole my leadership. So because of that, he's always very loud. He's always very vocal. He's always attacking the Prophet ﷺ.
Bitter,
Yeah, exactly.
spiteful.
Very, very bitter. So
Yeah.
he used to do all sorts of things, and we don't have time to go into all them, but he used to mock the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. He used to belittle and argue the commandments of the Prophet ﷺ. He used to turn away from the battlefield. And at one point of time, he even tried to cause crisis within the family, the household of the Prophet ﷺ himself by creating the slander against his wife, Aisha, of adultery. So this is very, very serious. And people think that this kind of thing or toxic influences, you see, it's proven in the seerah what the impact of these munafiqun, these hypocrites used to do. So in the Battle of Uhud, what happened is he didn't want to fight in the war, but he used his marketing strategy was, I feel that we should defend ourselves in Medina. We shouldn't go out to Uhud and fight them. So what he's telling them is that, we have our stronghold in our city. But in his back of his head, he just didn't want to go to the battlefield. He just want to cower at home and in safety, right?
Yeah.
So when they went to the battlefield, so imagine the Prophet ﷺ was with the Muslim army, 1,000 strong, but Abdullah ibn Ubay was continuously questioning authority, undermining these instructions, and say, "What is young man? Who does he think he is?" and all these things. And then he pulled back from the army and he brought 300 people along with him. 1/3 of the army gone. Can you imagine? Your city now is being invaded. 1/3 of your army is gone. You need all the manpower you can get to defend your city. It could be exterminated from 3,000 Quraysh, well-equipped soldiers, and 1/3 of your army is gone because of people like this. Yeah, subhanallah.
And
So
it's
these are
interesting to note also that the timing that he did that was really to hurt the Muslims. Like it was on the daybreak when the armies could see each other already. And that was the time where he decided that he will just put his bad influence on and just pull out 1/3 of the army basically. Subhanallah, this is something.
Yeah. And this guy Ubay, Abdullah bin Ubay, he's no ordinary person. He had this all planned out. I think.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
did
how
this,
so? Planned out?
Yeah, like Brother Rezat said, right?
Okay,
He did
okay.
that.
Shows the timing.
The timing. He took 300 people with him at that moment. That crucial moment where people are already preparing to go to war, and suddenly, hey, what happened? 300 people just went back to Medina. What's happening?
Yeah.
Imagine what that
breaking
does
the
to your morale.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Say as well.
So
And you can see that. I mean, this is basically the classic politics that you see in the workplace. Like people trying to undermine people's authority or people's good work by doing things at moments where people depend on them, for example. So
Okay.
somehow it can be translated to the workplace in the sense of workplace politics as well. The ugly side of politics that,
I can
similar
relate to that.
example to this.
Yeah. So what tends to happen is that when people undermine the leader in the workplace, they think that by doing so they get influence by demonstrating that they know better than the leader. So that's the power struggle that they're trying to show.
Yes.
Yeah, subhanallah. An interesting point in Surah Al-Ahzab, just wanted to share. So in Surah Al-Ahzab, ayat number 11, so Allah says this is the war where they had the great trench, and the 30,000 of the Quraysh, the confederates basically, of Quraysh and some tribes of the Jews and the Banu Ghatafan, they came together to invade Medina. And it was a very, very severe war. So Allah described it as hunalika betuliyal mu'minuna wa zulzilu zilzalan shadida. The believers at the time, the companions radiallahu anhum, they were fearful, man. They were scared. So even they had Iman, but because this is an invasion that could destroy the whole city. So they were also scared. But so in that fearful moment, that's when the munafiqun, the people of the hypocrites, they started to show their true colors. They said, "Oh, ma wa'adana Allahu wa rasuluhu illa ghurura." Oh, Allah and His Messenger promised nothing but lies. So you start to publicly show that these are lies. This will bring down the whole spirit of the army. Oh, this is all not correct. So it started to plant the fear that, oh, our wives and children are at home, we got to go and defend them. So they started to say that, they gave an excuse, very interesting. They said, Ya ahlam yathrib la muqama lakum farji'u. So, oh, there's nothing for you here, people of Medina. Let's go home. وَيَسْتَأْذِنُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمُ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّ بُيُوتَنَا عَوْرَةٌ وَمَا هِيَ بِعَوْرَةٍ. So they said, sorry, I just trying to translate that in a way that's relatable. So they're saying that the excuse was, oh, our homes are undefended. So you got to go and defend our wives and children. But Allah says, there's nothing there. Their homes are not exposed. And Allah says, in yuriduna illa firara. Oh, actually, they just wanted to run away. They're just creating an excuse. But it's interesting because Allah describes even the believers, they felt fear.
Yeah.
But at that moment when they saw walamma ra'al mu'minun al-ahzab, when the believers saw the ahzab, the invading army, they said, hadha ma wa'adana Allah wa rasuluh. This is what Allah and the messenger promised. So that's the attitude that we should have. Fine, we're all scared. We're all fearful. It's a difficult situation. But rise up to it. Have tawakkul in Allah. So that's a very interesting point. So when we talk about the toxic influences, about them, about the munafiqun creating the excuses, the believers had the positive effect. Now I said, this is what Allah promised us. So if we're going, either we win, we defend our beloved hometown of Medina, or number two, we die as shaheed, which is a win-win. So that brings up the whole morale. So I find very motivating to look at both sides of the argument when it comes to what influence you can exert to the people around you. MashaAllah.
It's about staying focused to your goal, right? It's about staying focused to your goal.
Staying focused on your goal, eyes on the prize, they say.
Exactly, yeah. So at work, if people try to be a bad negative influence to you, it doesn't matter, yeah. You can't control other people, but but you can control yourself. So just know what motivates you, which is the command of the believers to work, to find a which is halal, which is allowed. Keep that there. Keep that in your head. That's it.
And we have to struggle to keep that present in our thoughts as well, because when we are constantly in that environment, if we don't have that drive, right?
That's true.
Even for 1 second, we can let the shaitan to take over our hearts and minds. And ultimately lower down our morale, our aspiration becomes low, right? So I think that's that's a good thing to do. That's not a good thing, but that's an important thing to do, to have that continuous
focus.
Focus. And that drive and that drive that Brother Amir just said a few minutes ago.
And that drive and focus, I think one of the biggest things that helps you is surrounding yourself with good, positive people, with good friends.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's important, So you build that network,
Yes. The hypocrites actually, they remind me of what we see nowadays as keyboard warriors,
Oh yeah, keyboard warriors.
People of the internet, where they just spread rumors and all these things. And if you're not careful, you might get sucked into it. And it's important
to
know that for example, the believer, as how the believers were in those times, they didn't let all these words get affected and actually maintain their principles. And they know their principles, and basically whatever words they are saying doesn't affect them. So this is
they brush it off. They brush it away.
Yes.
But brushing, but those words, like sometimes, at times, it's the best solution is to brush it off. Is to be patient and avoid any confrontation.
Right.
Sometimes
Exactly.
in certain situation, you have to answer back. Sometimes you need to defend yourself. So when you're in that kind of situation, so just means be mindful of the words. Have a strategy on how you actually deal with this difficult conversation. Never ever never ever what you call that resort to violence. Yeah, that means
Course.
if the argument's in the email, keep it in the email. If the argument is in a verbal, keep it verbal. Do not escalate. Do not escalate. Yeah, because I think escalation that's one of the that's not a Muslim trait. Yeah? That's a munafiq trait. You escalate unnecessarily. I mean, if you escalate,
What does that mean? Like, give some examples. How escalating.
for instance, like if the conversation is if the argument is verbal, you don't have to have a peace fight for it.
Okay.
If it's in the office, don't put it in Facebook, right?
Something like that. Yes, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay.
And if you
Perhaps
can't,
also de-escalating.
and if you can't, let's see if you can, then have the proper channels. Have the HR, the harassment line, things like this. Draw in support from the bosses, from people who have more authority to help you with this deal with such a situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Keep the fighting in the ring, as they say. Don't bring it out. Don't drag it out.
Yeah, be
That's a very
professional.
good point. Be professional. Exactly.
Yeah.
Differentiate that. And by the way, this is something somebody told me. This is an opposite. You know what tends to do in Malaysian and in Asian culture? We tend to avoid arguments, but there's a lot of like uneasiness, and this kind of creates that toxic environment. But some other cultures, I think they were saying African cultures. Now in the room, they'll be throwing chairs. They'll be they'll be they'll be really really relentless. But after that, they go lunch together and they laugh. So it's
Asian
they have this.
like to
they
do
can separate
Cold
that.
War, right?
Yeah, they like to have this cold shoulder thing, right? There's this terasa kind of thing.
If you're strong enough, yeah, if you're strong enough to hold it in, yeah, don't complain about all the repercussion. Yeah, for instance.
Exactly, that's very good. Yeah, holding it in is good, but then just let it go, right? Like, don't hold it in and like wait for the opportune moment to zoom in your sniper rifle.
Or you might self-explode. I mean, if you're not strong enough to do that, then yeah, channel it out, yeah, in the correct way. But if you're a strong person who can take a lot of things, yeah, then why not? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I like that point, because people think like when you hold your anger, it's bottling it up. But you see, something interesting about our deen is that Allah teaches us that even the prophets used to cry and complain to Allah. So, for example, Prophet Yaqub, when he lost his son, Prophet Yusuf, he used to cry until he lost his sight.
Yeah.
Now, we think that crying to Allah is like bottling it in. Oh, no, it's absolutely venting it out.
It's
And
a
it's
sign
not
of weakness.
It's not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, it's not a sign of weakness. Yeah.
But actually, you're right. People like to think it's a sign of weakness, right? You just are crying. Oh, no, you're venting it out. Because if you keep it bottled up, eventually you're going to line up that sniper rifle shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good, mashallah. Actually, I just wanted to share another impact of toxic influences. What happened in the lifetime of Uthman bin Affan, radiallahu anhu, the third Khalifa? How he got killed.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a
That
very
was a bad-
interesting story.
there was a very toxic environment to live in.
Exactly. What triggered it? Was it basically a few troublemakers who was not happy with Uthman? Some of them had personal issues with him. Some of them were punished because of the had, because of the legal punishments had against them. But they didn't look at it as this was legal punishment. They said, oh, Uthman did this. So they used to put out all these kinds of negative and toxic kind of things against Uthman. And they used to rally other people who had personal beef against Uthman. And you see, of all these people, it sounds like a small thing. But remember, back then, they didn't have social media. So when people are loud in the streets, it attracts other people who are also troublemakers. So that's why they call them people of fitnah, the people of troublemakers. I think. Can you say it? Yeah, the troublemakers. So these troublemakers, they used to attract other troublemakers as well. They used to come. And eventually, they used to have crowds by thousands, and they used to siege the house of Uthman. But important point to note, not a single one of them was a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they used to attract all these negative influences who used to voice it out. Now, you see what happened is when they started to voice out the things that they were not happy with Uthman. So, for example, they used to accuse him of spending for his family members. Right now, people who are companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they know Uthman is already a wealthy person. Yeah, of course he wants to spend on his family members. Alhamdulillah. But they used to sing, oh no, he's taking money from the treasury. Now, you see, back then, accounting wasn't something that everybody can go on a website and see what they spend the money. Right?
Financial report, right?
Oh, no financial report, right?
No financial report. Public financial
So when people start there's no public
Yeah.
financial report. So people, when they used to complain these things, it used to trigger. Oh, really? Yeah, that's true. His brother live in this palace. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We gotta get justice.
Yeah, we
So
have
that's
to
what happened.
remember that they were so eloquent in their speech, right?
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
very eloquent.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the marketing strategy
Planting
was
seeds
fantastic.
of doubts.
Seeds of
Confronting
doubts.
conflict,
Exactly.
it's like birds of a feather flock together. So
Mhm.
no sahabat was in
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
And again, this comes back to su'udhan. Like, why you don't even have solid proof? Instantly, you just you're just making things up
Rumor mill.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
by
Yeah.
facts here and there. You're just making lines up. Oh yeah,
Ah.
betul.
Anything can appear beautiful when you present it in the
Sah.
apparently the right way. Yeah?
Right, exactly. So this is how conspiracy theories work, which is a topic for another day. So resist the temptation. Okay. But there's a very important point of this story. These people, in practice, they may not seem like the majority, but they were the loud minority.
Mhm.
This is what happened in social media today. You see, these people make a lot of noise, and then they get a lot of traction. And what happens is, you see, sometimes we have to be careful not to accidentally promote these things. Sometimes we get very angry at these people, so we also share to rebuke them. But what have you done? You shared their nonsense. You know what I mean? So
Any publicity is good publicity. Yeah. For them.
exactly. Yeah, any publicity is good publicity for them. So see, this thing started to grow because they're so loud. It paints a picture, a perception that this represents the majority, but it's not. It's just a few loud people who, like Amir said, they attract people. What was the phrase again?
Birds of a feathers flock together.
Flock together, right? But
Ah.
yeah, so they flock together, they bring it, and they used to siege Uthman. And because their volumes are so much, this is how eventually that led to the murder of Uthman, a righteous Khalifa, radiallahu anhu. So this is a real life example that shows us that if you're not careful, it can lead to someone's death. And this wasn't just somebody, this was the murder of a companion, a righteous companion who was promised paradise. And ironically, somebody who the Prophet ﷺ said that he's a martyr. We knew that already.
Mhm.
So yeah, subhanallah. So this shows the impact that it has on society. So subhanallah. All right, so mashallah. So that brings us to the last segment. What should we do and how should we handle these toxic influences? So I think we've talked a bit about that, but let's have a more focused discussion now. How can we handle these situations?
The easiest way is to quit, but I think for some people, quitting is not an option, right? I think we need to have what they say, a coping mechanism.
A coping
So,
mechanism.
Can
I think that's the last
yeah.
option, Brother Aziz.
Which one? Quitting.
Hijrah. I like to call
Hijrah.
it. It's going away from the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, leave group.
Leave.
Okay.
if all things fail. Yeah.
So the coping mechanism first, and then if there's nothing to do, we need to quit. But what if quitting is not an option? Back to coping mechanism, like set boundaries. We need to have an exit plan, or when people start talking about bad influences, so we just exit from there. And if they, just like our brother, I don't remember who said about when the people are mocking the ayat of the Quran, we should not be there. It's like that's the
Right.
example of we have to have an exit plan. We need to know when is the bad influence would affect us or affect anyone. We should just exit. And sometimes we need to um, change routine. Maybe usually in morning we have a breakfast with our friend who is a bad influence. So we just change our routine. We don't have to be with him. Like smoking,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a choice. It's choice,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
it's choice. And I think that's all for me. What about the
Mhm.
others?
Like Aki Aziz mentioned is quite interesting. Basically, it's distancing yourself from the bad influences or toxic influences. But as human beings, we sort of need certain level of support system, or we have to replace it with another alternative. So the alternative would be, as Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said,
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Inshallah.
find a good companion to be with. For example, in Sahih Sunan At-Tirmidhi, a man is upon the deen of his close companion. So carefully consider whom you take as a close companion. So this is something that is very important in the sense that the ones who you take as your friends will be directly an influence to you. So you have to pay attention to the ones who you surround yourselves with in order to protect yourself from negative influences and always to keep yourself on a good reference point. For example, like what the hadith mentioned by Aki Faisal before was the good companion is like the mask seller and the bad companion is like the blacksmith, right? Yeah. So this is, I think, quite important in the sense that you provide yourself a good alternative and a good environment in as opposed to being in a toxic environment. So that I guess it will help a lot to get yourself right and always to get you as like a check and balance. For example, if you err a bit, your friends, your good companions will remind you of the good things. And yeah, so this is basically a good alternative towards
Yeah,
being.
maybe I can add to that. So if you want to practice that hadith in the context that you said, so let's say it's a difficult choice for you to leave your work. So you may have toxic colleagues, for example, or toxic boss. But if it's difficult for you to leave or change your environment, at least the environment outside of your office, you need to find good friends. I think that's a practical application here.
Yeah, that's a practical one.
True.
So on your weekends, on the nights, you surround yourself with good company to remind yourself, your work is to support your life. Your work is not your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, quitting is the
Brilliant.
last resort.
You work to live, you don't live to work. Yeah?
Ooh, yeah. Normally people say it's eat instead of work, but okay. You eat to live and not live to eat.
Okay, so there are basically three simple things that might help us to encounter, to deal with toxic people. And these 3 points, I think they are practical, inshallah. So the first one is that we need to set limits. We need to set limits. This is not about it is not about establishing new power relations, but about not allowing power to become the driving force of your interaction. Okay, because a toxic person mostly they want to be on top. Yeah, you see that sometimes from narcissists, for example. Setting limits allows for a better understanding of what kind of hierarchies are at play. Your boss can give you responsibilities you should take care of while at work, but that's it. No more than that. So you set your own limits. You know yourself. So, like the Prophet ﷺ said, "Istafti qalbak," right? Istafti qalbak. Question yourself. Ask your own nafs. And al-birru, the goodness and piety is that in which your heart will incline towards it and your heart will feel at ease. Right. And the other way around, the sin is when your heart feels like you feel agitated by doing the sin, although everyone around you are
committing sins.
Commit the same things. So ask yourself, and then you can set your own limits. And then number
this
two,
is very good.
Yeah, and then number
I think
two,
this relates back to what Amir said, being authentic, isn't it? So you yourself know, and
who you are.
There are two things here. Yeah, you know who you are, and you need to practice self-awareness. That's what the hadith is highlighting. So some situations, it's if you know you cannot handle it, you need to know what's good for you. It may not be the same solution for everyone. That's the important point to note.
Yeah, that's true. So I'll just continue. The number two is be assertive. So we tell the person in a clear and simple way how you feel or what you meant to say. A toxic person may try to use your words against you. Okay, bear in mind, interpreting them in the exact opposite way you intended. But make yourself clear. I said X because I wanted you to know that Y, right? Whenever you feel Z, I feel W. You know, you make that, you make it clear.
Okay.
You make it clear. Don't beat around the bush. You know, these people need some clear statements.
Don't
Yeah.
get into their game, basically.
Yeah, don't do
Right.
that.
Very good.
And
Very
last
good.
but not least,
Very good.
stay away. Stay aware and on top of your own emotions. That's the most important thing. There is
Self-awareness. Okay.
self-awareness. Take care of yourself. Toxicity is often irrational. It follows its own logic. Okay, and the worst course of action is trying to play the same game, like Brother Faisal said. Keep in mind you are not supposed to respond in the same emotional terms, but rather bring some sober-headed reasoning to the scene. So we need to be rational. In
Take the
dealing
high
with
road,
this.
as they say.
Yeah, take the high road.
Right.
That's the
might-
mindset when you give nasihat and give advice, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
definitely. There's no other way to it. So that might imply sometimes to withdraw, regroup, and then come back with solutions. But by yourself sometime if needed. So I like this. There's a poet. This is Arabic poet. He said, "إذا جريت في خلق دنيئة فأنت ومن تجاريه سواء." He said, if you if you fight, if you argue with the person who has low manners and low aspiration, then therefore you and that person are at the same level. Right? So don't go down to their level lah. You take the high road, as Brother Faisal said. Yeah.
Wow, very good. MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add. So this is very good. Very good. Jazakallah khairan. So I just wanted to add, I think number one, the most important quality we should have is sabr, patience.
Mhm.
Now, we all know this, but sometimes we don't see what sabr means in practice. So let me give you an example. So for example, we speak about controlling yourself in anger. The Prophet ﷺ says the true strong person is the one who can control himself when he's in a state of anger. Dealing with toxic people will trigger your nerves, man. It's really going to annoy you. It's going to really trigger your emotions. And what I wanted to apply the principle of sabr here is an ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah where Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا إِعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Don't let your hatred against a certain group of people cloud your judgment against what's just, what is justice. So this actually requires a lot of patience. You see, handling these people in the workplace or even in our families, you still have to be just with them. If they have rights on us, even if it's your own parents, and people do face sometimes parents who are giving them challenges sometimes, but you still have your obligations as a son. And that's very difficult to do. Huh? Sometimes we think that because they're toxic, they are deprived from their rights. Oh no, you have to still do your job. So as a boss, you still have your certain responsibilities towards them. So do not compromise that. Number two, we need to remember that when it comes to toxicity, the environment, toxic people around you, whether you feel impacted or not, it's actually your choice. That's important to note. So you can choose whether that will affect you or not. It's difficult, but you are the one who's in control. Those things are outside of your control, but what you have, it's within what you can control. Now, it's something to take note. See, when we talk about toxic environments, I always remind myself about the early converts to Islam in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, Muhajirun, the people who made hijrah from Makkah to Medina. You see, these were the people, a minority, who is surrounded by so much idol worship, so much adultery, so much all of these sins. They are living in the worst toxic environment ever, and yet they can still make the change to become the best believers. Subhanallah, think about that, right? So to me, it's very motivating to think about the example. Oh, sorry, I think my connections.
Oh, you're fine actually.
Okay, yeah. All right, so yeah, these were people. It's very empowering to me to know that you can always make a choice despite the environment around you. So that's a very important thing to take note. And the best example also is in Surah Tahrim, where Allah tells us the example of Asiyah, the wife of Fir'aun. Now, Fir'aun, this was the worst tyrant ever, right? This is the epitome of toxicity, right? But yet, even though she was living in his household, she could have said, just go with the flow, I'm living in this palace and so on. But no, she went against him, and she was a believer, and she actually sought refuge from Allah from his oppression. So this gives us an example that you can rise above, like take the high road, as Shami highlighted, to against all these toxic environments around you. So I think the emphasis now is always to ask ourselves, what can I do? What can I do about this? So Allah tells us, "Faman sha'a falyu'min, wa man sha'a falyakfur." You don't have to be affected by this. If you want to believe, let him believe, and if you want to disbelieve, let him disbelieve. So the context of this ayah is also very interesting because it's in surah. Who knows? فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. What does that trigger?
Very familiar.
I give you I give you a hint. It's Friday.
Surah Al-Kahf.
Kaf.
Al-Kahf, exactly. Yeah.
MashaAllah.
Okay, so look at the context of Surah Al-Kahf, where it's about a group of youth who, not many of them, less than 10 of them, who used to disown the evil practices, which is the toxic environment of the society, which is to worship idols.
Mhm.
And they used to make that choice, and they don't want to follow the crowd or succumb to the peer pressure. They stood firm on their principles. That's what get them the honor of becoming Ashabul Kahf. Right? So it's important to remember that we don't have to be part of the crowd. So the third one is also to have knowledge. I think we emphasize this a lot so that we can really have that true substance to see, to differentiate the right from the wrong. And also actually when dealing with toxic people, I like to remind an ayah in Surah An-Nur where Allah says, "La tahsabuhu sharral lakum, bal huwa khairul lakum." Don't think it's something bad for you. No, it's something good for you. Now, who knows the context of this ayah, Surah Nur? What's the context of the asbabun nuzul of these ayat of the Surah An-Nur?
This is in regarding, wallahu a'lam. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah.
Okay, all right. No one wants to try. It's okay to be
Can
wrong.
try lah.
Okay, what is it?
It's in regards to divorce, matters of divorce.
Oh no.
Is it correct? No, it's not.
Yeah. So okay, what it is? The context is this was the story of the slander of Aisha. So the hypocrites and a group of believers who got stuck into this accusation of accusing Aisha, of the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, of adultery. And so this really caused a lot of stir in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, and people were very, very sad. Abu Bakr was torn between his daughter and between the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't know which side to take. The Prophet ﷺ doesn't know whether it's true or not. So it was a very, very stressful time. So Allah revealed the first verses, the ayat of Surah An-Nur. And at the end of those ayat, Allah says, don't think it's a bad thing for you. It's a good thing for you. Now, it's not saying that what they did is correct or validated. What they did is horrible and still wrong. They still are accountable for it. They'll be punished for what they did. But it's good for you in terms of the lessons that you get from it. So actually,
Inshallah.
if you think about it this way, if you're handling toxic people, right, this is an opportunity for you to be a better person. It's like challenging your limits, you know? So like, it's like whenever I deal with a toxic person, I remember this ayah and I'm like, okay, this is like going to the gym, right? Gonna push me to the limits.
Like
And
an opportunity to grow. Huh?
Yeah, an opportunity to grow. So I think
Allah.
that's a good mindset. In
Good
terms of
mindset, yeah.
solution, an ayah, a very simple ayah in Surah Al-A'raf, Allah says, "Khudhil afu wa'mur bil urf wa'arid anil jahilin." It's a very, very short but very concise. Number one, show forgiveness, enjoin what's good, and turn away from the foolish. So number one, you have to forgive them. I think like coming back to the very early part of the conversation, like Shahmi highlighted, these people are human beings. They also have their flaws. And sometimes the reason why they're toxic is a projection of their own lack of self-esteem. Or maybe they have other personal issues that they're just dishing out on you because they can't come to terms with that. So forgive them. Don't take things personally. The Prophet ﷺ was also like this. He never takes things personally if he was offended. But if the rights of Allah were violated, he'll be the first one to avenge them. Right? Now, but again, this is easier said than done. But at least we know theoretically. Yeah? So let's try our best to do that. Also another one, enjoin what's good. Wa'mur bil urf. Try to do, don't forget, right? Our role as du'at, people calling to Islam, people calling to the path of Allah, is to call people towards what's good. Sometimes we think that these people are hopeless. No, actually, you should try to attempt. These toxic people, sometimes they just need connection. Sometimes they just need a sense of
Attention.
attention. Yeah. Yeah, give it to them. So in a way that you can relate to them. Maybe you can have a chance. Also, I think I wanted to share when it comes to enjoining the good. I want to share an advice that's given by Mufti Menk. You see, Mufti Menk, this was said in the Straight Path back in 2015. So he said, you see what we see in society now. People are always sharing negative things, right? These things are going viral. So he said, you can't really control these things, or you can't really control what people, the toxic influences that's happening outside, but you can control your influence. So instead of fretting or getting like annoyed at all these widespread toxic influence, you have to ask yourself, what positive can I spread? What part have I done to make the good things viral? So I mean, it's a very important point, which is it's about time that the good people put their feet on the ground and we start to become positive influences for other people instead of just allowing these people to reign free. So like what I see in my workplace, if I know that there are people who are speaking out that are affecting things negatively, I will speak up, but in a good way. So I will voice out solutions. It's very uncomfortable, to be honest, but I will be the one who's trying to acknowledge the great effort that other people have done. People say, oh, complain this, complain this. I'm the one who's trying to, but this is the thing, because you want to steer people away. Because like Amir said, not everything situation you can just keep quiet. There are some times where everything is just going to get down. If you're just going to keep quiet, you're actually submitting to the status quo. So that's also not ideal, right? So, and last resort, which is, as I may say, this is the last resort. A'rid anil jahilin. Turn away from the ignorant. So this is especially you have to make a choice. Not every situation you can turn away, you can get rid of them. When it comes to family, you can't get rid of them. When it comes to work colleagues, also not all the time it's within your control. But when it comes to friends and social media, I mean, there's always the button called unfriend. There's always the button called block. If it's your WhatsApp group, there's always the button called remove. I mean, like remind what Shahmi highlighted. You have to be assertive. You have to have the courage to say no. At the end of the day, you see, the thing is sometimes we have this resistance against getting rid of certain people because we think that number one, it might seem like we're the bad guy. And number two, we think that, I want to try and positively impact this person. So all these things actually, as we said, when you positively impact a person, remember like the lesson we tried to highlight, sometimes you are going to get changed by that thing. So that's not very useful for you. So, but I think it's important for us to note that when you say you leave a toxic environment, doesn't mean you boycott them forever. You still have the hopes that they can change, and it applies differently in different cases. But this is not a small thing, because when we look at the hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim about the man who killed 99 people, I'm sure you're familiar with that story, right? Yeah. What was the advice given by the knowledgeable person?
Make hijrah.
Make hijrah.
Make hijrah.
Right.
From this place.
Leave this land. All right. The word that was used in the narration that I have here, it says, don't return to this land because it's an evil land. You need to leave this. You need to go to a place where it's more righteous people there. So hijrah is definitely an option. Now, interesting point. Did this scholar himself make hijrah to that land?
No.
He stayed, right?
Interesting.
So what does that tell you?
Interesting gem there.
Coming back to the point of self-awareness. Sometimes some people just cannot handle that situation. You know yourself. If you cannot handle it, you have to take what's good for you and your akhirah. It might not seem like the nice thing to do, but you have to put your foot down sometimes.
Yeah,
But for some people,
I have a friend who was in Miri.
Yeah.
He was a drug addict, but then he go hijrah to KL and do not want to go back because he knows that if he go back, he would be a drug addict. I think our brother Reza knows him. And then now he's a Quran teacher, right?
Yeah.
Difficult decision for him.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
He was an addict since he was, I think, in high school, right? Middle school. Yeah.
See,
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
Great transformation.
Yeah, but interesting, right? There are many people in Miri who don't do that.
Yeah.
But for his case to be in Miri, it's not helpful for him, right? That's the
MashaAllah.
It comes back to the group of friends, I guess, as well.
Quite inspiring.
there's that. Yes. Yeah.
Quite inspiring for me.
Yes, man.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, so I think it's very important. Also, another point, sometimes the reason why we find it difficult to ditch negative or toxic people is that this is honestly sometimes what I do, which I don't think is a good habit. We want to find out how these negative people think. You know what I mean? They say keep your enemies closer. So you keep them as friends on Facebook and you see, oh, okay. But it's not good, like it annoys you so much. It drains so much of your energy. It's like, what is wrong with this guy? So actually the net effect, it's not helping you.
Yeah. It's taking away a lot of your energy into thinking about, these things, but actually it's, maybe it's not the best approach if you cannot handle it,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the point.
So
If you can handle it.
you can become so consumed about it, and
Yeah.
Depends on person to person, I guess. Huh?
It depends on person to person. Because there's some people who are fine with it. Like they're okay to live in the mind of the enemy.
Exactly. Not easy.
And I think another one is as a leader. Now again, as a person, we need to practice hikmah at all times. What is hikmah? We need to know when to practice something, or how and what extent we need to do it. So not all situations apply for every single person. As a leader, this is super important. It's not all the time you can just simply get rid of someone. It's not. Sometimes there are certain solutions which are applicable for that moment and that situation and that person or that group of people. So this is another difficult situation. Now, as a leader, if you know these people, you need to admonish them. You need to try your best to get them in line, but it's actually very draining. So that's also another reality, and that's also something that interesting when I read the book Good to Great. So in this book, they highlight the characteristics of how some of the good to great companies operate. So one of the characteristics they highlight is first who and then what. So the point is they are going to emphasize who is on the team first, and then they think about what's the vision of the company, what they want to achieve. So the point of the who then what is they're very, very rigorous when it comes to removing toxic people and people who don't have the right attitude. A lot of the non-good to great companies, they don't have this discipline. They're like, oh, let's hold on to them. Maybe we can change them. Then the whole leadership team has to spend all the resources to handle these people. It's not helpful. So these people had this discipline of doing it to the extent that even some companies, their shareholders, their own brother, they had to fire. So this is not helpful. So yeah, you have to practice it. It doesn't work for every situation all the time, but you need to have that courage to do what's the right thing. Right. So
in that sense, just to add, like it also ties into the culture of the company, right? Just maintaining a certain culture that you want to set for the company in order for it to progress and to become a very positive environment. So whoever or whatever force is not in line with this culture, then perhaps that can be trimmed off to become more like a better company in that sense.
Yeah. That's exactly what they wrote actually. MashaAllah. Spot on. And just remind us, in history, this happened. When Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, we know the great achievements that he's done. What's one of the first things that he used to do when he was a leader? He used to get rid of the problematic deviant sects first, and then set his sights on Baitul Maqdis. Because if they're gonna have internal conflicts, it's not gonna be productive for the whole ummah. So get rid of them first. So that's an interesting point to note. Also, I think a very interesting hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, it's a pretty long hadith, so I'll try and summarize it in the interest of time. So there was a man, a Khawarij man, who questioned the Prophet ﷺ in the way he distributed the spoils of war. Now, the Prophet ﷺ says, so that man came out to the Prophet and he said, oh, fear Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ was angry. He said, why not? Woe to you. If I not fear Allah, who will fear Allah? And then some companions, they said, oh, allow us to chop his head off. The Prophet ﷺ said, no. Okay. Another example, a very similar example, a man of the hypocrites also questioned the Prophet ﷺ, and the companions wanted to kill. And this example was Abdullah ibn Ubay, the leader of the hypocrites that we mentioned previously. So the Prophet ﷺ says, da'hu, leave him, don't kill him. Why? La yatahaddathun nas anna Muhammadan yaqtulu ashabahu. So that mankind, people will not say that Muhammad kills his companions. Perception. Now everybody knows Abdullah bin Ubay is rebel, right? And he, as the prophet, he knows for a fact that these are hypocrites. But still, he wants to set a precedent here. You don't judge based on what's in their hearts. You judge based on what's apparent. They didn't do something that was outright criminal. They just questioned. It dragged down the morale. It was toxic, no, nevertheless. But as a leader, you need to make this firm judgment. It's not easy to do, by the way, this kind of thing.
Of course.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of lessons behind this hadith and how the Prophet ﷺ handled these problematic individuals. And yeah, Allah knows best. Yeah. So Amir, you want to close off on how you want to handle these?
So to me, like whenever you're faced with trials, tests, yeah, you must always have this good thoughts on Allah, have husnul zan to Allah. That whenever He tests you with a fitna, a challenge, He always give you solution. And the solution always come from the sunnah. And I think in our talk, in our session, we spoke at length of all the solutions, yeah. And when once you apply all the solution, yeah, the end goal of fitna, yeah, is three things, as what Ibn Qayyim mentioned. Is that number one, it makes you a more obedient slave to Allah by worshipping Him alone, because the tawakkul you had to Him, and also by applying all the methods that was stipulated in the Sunnah. So you make you a more obedient slave to Allah. Number one. Number two, it humbles yourself to know that human beings, all creation has flaws. That Allah is the ever perfect.
Very good. Yeah.
And you, as strong as you might be, you will always need assistance from Allah. So you humble yourself. The second point. And the third point is, if you're not successful in the methods that you implement, then still have good thoughts on Allah, because fitna is a way that expedite your sins in this world. Yeah. And on the day of judgment, when this world means nothing, so that expiation of sin means a lot of things.
Subhanallah.
Wow.
So that's true.
Just to add to what Aki Amir mentioned, to seek assistance from Allah in terms of humbling yourself in front of Allah. In the ayah of Surah Al-Anfal, ayah number 29, Allah mentioned, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tattaqullah yaj'al lakum furqana. So, all you have believed, if you fear Allah or have the taqwa of Allah, Allah will grant you a criterion. And furqan means here is to be able to differentiate between the truth and falsehood. Basically, to look into whatever is going on around you and to know that this is a fitna, this is what's good for you, basically to discern what is the best thing for you. So it all comes back to taqwa. Subhanallah, it's an amazing lesson that a lot of the things in the deen, the root is taqwa. So if you have taqwa, a lot of benefits or a lot of good things that Allah promised in the Quran, and in this example, this is He will grant you a criterion, a furqan, to differentiate between the truth and the falsehood. And also in regards to our attitudes as a believer, in the sense of what Akhi Faisal mentioned, to be a force of good. There's this hadith in Bukhari where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, the believer is like the date palm tree. So when you think about it, the date palm tree, it's strong. So means it's the believer is very principled. At the same time, the believer always tries to provide benefit to the people around him. So being a force of good, like Akhi Faisal mentioned before, in the sense that you are not a negative influence or you're not a toxic influence, but you are the positive influence. And that is the attitude of the believer in this regard.
Inshallah.
MashaAllah, that's very good, very good. Okay, brother, so alhamdulillah, we had a very, very good discussion. So inshallah, I just want to go around, maybe 20-second wrap up from every one of you before we end the episode, inshallah. So let's start with brother Shahmi. Welcome back. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Sorry about that.
That's no problem. Okay, so yeah, let's do a quick wrap up about this topic about toxic influences, inshallah.
Okay, so I would like to say that when dealing with these influences or people, first we need to get away from all the toxic influences. So in trying to better ourselves, we can divide people into two categories. One are the people who actually are toxic to others, and two, those who are dealing with these toxic people or toxic relationships, who are in the toxic relationship. So number one, for the people who shows toxic characteristics, first and foremost, ittaqullah. Have taqwa of Allah. Read the Quran and go back to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you'll see that in many instances that Allah subhanahu wa taala, He actually have warned us against being toxic to people. In the general sense. One of the most I think prominent ayahs in the Quran is in the Suratul Humazah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, Wailul likulli humazatil lumazah. Woe to all those who like to scorn and belittle people. So while here the scholars, they differ in opinion. So just a quick one. One of the opinions is that while is a valley, one of the valleys of Jahannam. So in this sense, Allah is saying, these people who love to scorn, and every day what they do is this. This is the only thing. These are the only things that they do. They talk about people. They scorn. They scoff at others. So these people ultimately they will be in the valley of valley in the valley in Jahannam. Wal-iyadhu billah. And another while means woe, shame on you, shame on you. So
Right,
Allah
I see.
subhanahu wa ta'ala, yeah. So we need to not only read Quran, but we need to have tadabbur of the Quran, the words, and we need to look into the tafsir of the ulama, the exegesis of the scholars of the deen, and so that we know, we can understand better. And inshallah, by knowing this, we will better ourselves. We will stay away from these toxic characteristics. And number two, those who actually deal with toxic influences, be it from their own family members, among the family members, or co-workers in colleagues in workplaces. One hadith that comes to mind is, I don't know if it's mentioned already or not, because I accidentally left the conversation, but it's a hadith narrated by Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, when which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, al-mu'min alladhi yukhalitu an-nas yasbiru ala adahum a'zamu ajran min al-mu'minin alladhi la yukhalitu an-nas wa la yasbiru ala adahum. The believer who mixes with people, okay, the believer who mixes with people and endures their injury is better than the person who does not mix with people nor endure the injury. Okay, but this there's a tanbih, there's a
Disclaimer?
the highlight, disclaimer. Sorry, jazakallah khair. There's a disclaimer. In this sense, we need to mix with people when we have something to say to him, against him, or we have an advice. We would like to advise them. Okay, this is like there's a scholar. He said in one of the hadith book, he said, فيه أفضلية من يخالط الناس مخالطة يأمرهم فيها بالمعروف. Okay, this is one of the hadith here is specifically as a targhib, like how do you say this? Like menggalakkan in English. What's menggalakkan in English?
Encouragement.
Yeah, encouragement. Okay, Allah understand. So this hadith is an encouragement for people to actually go and mix with the people who have bad habits or in this case, toxic, and give them sincere advice. And be patient to what might come out from them. Like maybe they would
Passive
attack
aggression.
you with passive aggressors, right? Okay, maybe they would be aggressive,
Stonewall.
Yeah, of course.
Stonewall.
Stonewalling, or trying to avoid confrontation and whatnot. But just be patient, and whenever we deal with this, remember this hadith, and inshallah we'll get the best reward. أعظم أجر من المؤمنين الذي لا يخالط الناس. As the Prophet ﷺ said, you will have a better reward and a bigger reward than those who avoid contact, whatsoever.
Mixing with them, yeah.
Yeah, mixing with them. Yeah, that's from me, inshallah.
Okay, very good. Mashallah, barakallah fiqh. So, Brother Aziz, let's do a quick wrap up on this topic of toxic influences. Any takeaway messages for you?
Great message. I think to be with the bad influence people is, like what we said, is toxic, but we have to get to reality that we are living in how to say, we are living with people, so in
communities.
In communities we cannot avoid 100% this bad influence people, but we can minimize it. We can do our best to minimize it, and just follow we need to follow the Quran and Sunnah and the wisdom of the people, the experts. And
yeah, mashallah.
Yeah, inshallah. I think that's all for me.
Very good, very good. Jazakallah khairan. Brother Amir, inshallah.
Okay, so I think back to four basic things in everything we do. Yeah, seek knowledge to identify the problem, to identify the solution, and then put in practice the solution. Yeah, and then say good words, advise people on the right path. Yeah, and having patience to endure all the steps.
Very good. Brother Amir, I noticed your background has changed quite a few times. Are you trying to... Is it me? Is my mind playing tricks on me, or is it...
It's like moonwalking slowly.
Okay. Okay, very good. Mashallah.
Awesome.
Mashallah.
Okay. Barakallah fiqh. Brother Reza?
Oh, yeah. Yes, so just to pick up as well, interesting point that Aki Aziz mentioned, that nowadays we are living in a society which is sometimes the toxic influences are unavoidable, whether it's your workplace, in your personal space, your group of friends.
Media social.
Yeah,
Online.
exactly.
Media.
Online media, basically every aspect of your life is open and exposed to toxic influences. So in that sense, we've got to set some points that we can navigate them quite in a good way. So for example, the first thing that we can do is that surround yourselves with good companionship, so that keeps you in a check and balance, and seek knowledge so that you know you have the awareness to know what is good and bad and what is differentiate exactly in terms of what's good and what's bad for you, and finally seek guidance from Allah, and in this regard have taqwa of Allah. Inshallah, He will give you the criterion to distinguish the good and the bad. And if all else fails, there's always the hijrah option. So there is no, let's say, thing that will prevent you from getting the toxic influences by, let's say, there is nothing that can stop you from rising above the toxic influences. There are some coping techniques that we can try to inculcate to free yourself from toxic influences.
Okay, mashallah. Thank you. Jazakallah khairan. So last but not least, for me, just have two things. So first of all, we need to have an awareness so that we ourselves don't turn into toxic influences. So one of the practical things that we need to do in our daily lives is to get feedback from people. So even our own wives, our good friends that we trust, just ask them, like, what do you feel being around me? Like, what was the thoughts? Sometimes we don't realize
that's
this.
uncomfortable. That's really
Very
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
But it has to be done.
Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes we think that we have our own perception of ourselves, and because we have a personal stake in it, we tend to be in denial. So having that
Of course.
feedback perspective always helps, especially at the workplace as well. So have the courage to ask. Of course, start with people that you trust, and then hopefully get up from there. So you need to have that sense of self-awareness so that you yourself don't turn into what you want to seek refuge from. So secondly, just to relate back to the hadith that sets the tone about whether you are a perfume seller or a blacksmith. So the question that we should always be asking ourselves, which is basically what I want to end off, is all of us give off a smell. It's either a smell of perfume or a smell of smoke. So my question to you and all of us here is, what smell do you want to give? Okay, so on that note, inshallah, that ends the discussion for this episode. Jazakumullah khairan.
Wa iyyakum.
Subhanakallahumma wa
Barakallahu
bihamdik.
fikum.
Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik.
Jazakumullahu khairan for listening. Don't forget to hit the like button. And if you feel that your family or your friends might get value from the discussion, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.